town. It's good to see everyone here. I really appreciate you coming here today. With that, I'll be making just a very few remarks. You didn't come here to listen to me, obviously. We brought in quite a team of folks that have worked on broadband, understand broadband, and what I'd like to do, the format will be, a lot of these folks are from the Twin Cities. We're going to get them out of here by 2:30. That doesn't mean the conversation stops. Over on the table there, I've got a little brochure thing there that has a card that has my name, address, phone numbers, emails, and so forth, so you can get a hold of me anytime. So again, I thank you for coming today, and I think what we'll do is we'll just start right off with Assistant Majority Leader. And I'm just so those of you who don't know, I'm Greg Davids. I am so privileged to represent Fillmore and Houston counties. In the judge's description of the redistricting, it's the shortest description. It says District 20B, Fillmore and Houston counties. No more, no less. I used to have part of basically four counties. I see some mayors here. Could I see some hands of mayors? Mayor Robin Crom, Mayor Struzak from Spring Valley, Robin Crom's from Spring Valley, Mayor of Lanesboro. But us Spring Valley guys have to stick together. So with that being said, any other elected official? County Commissioner Lentz is here, City Clerk Ms. Zimmer is here. Do we have any other elected officials that are here today? Oh, we've got a school board member here. Very, very good. Who am I missing? Miss anybody else? Because when I start doing names, I always miss somebody. You know what? I hear about it later. That's just the way it goes. So my contact information is right over there. Please feel free to call me anytime you'd like to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Majority Leader Ron Kresha. We are actually twins, separated at birth. We have one thing that's similar in both our districts. We represent the veteran cemeteries, the two veteran cemeteries in Minnesota, Preston, Little Falls. So no further ado, let's give a Fillmore County welcome to Ron Kresha.
Well, thank you. And Representative Davids, as you know, just does a nice job of representing his district. And down in St. Paul, he's one of the guys that really understands how things move. So I was very honored to come down, and then after I had Big Boys, I realized I need to come down here more often. So
Big Bobs.
Big Bobs. Thank you. Now I need to come down here more to get the name right and the burgers. But thank you for having us. So a couple of things that I want to talk about why I've gotten into broadband, and I'm going to give you a short story of my background. I started out as a teacher in Ivanhoe, Minnesota, almost straight across from here to the west, and I was teaching kids in this small town, about 800. And this was back in the early 90s when the internet was just starting to come around, and we had a tough time getting resources. We had a tough time getting to library, many of the same things that even Marcia would get 23 miles away. But once the internet came, and once I figured out, hey, we can connect these kids, the resources that opened up to these kids was absolutely fantastic. As a teacher, what opened up to me to offer to these kids became very, very instrumental to what I did in the classroom. So then my next thing, I moved to Pierce, Minnesota, and in the mid-90s, we were pulling fiber, and we were pulling copper, and we were doing this on the weekends with volunteers. We figured out the value of connecting the world. After that, I left. The internet was so immensely popular at that point, was moving us forward. I started an education company that was online that allowed parents to learn with their kids at home, because what was happening is at that time kids were learning PowerPoint, Hyper Studio, and they were going home and their parents couldn't answer the questions. So I went, my gosh, we got to figure out how we can get this resource to them. So I started an online learning company, and from there I did that in rural Minnesota, and this all ties together. I started this international company in rural Minnesota, and what I found out was, wow, I had access to some of the brightest and the best labor force ever in rural Minnesota. And it was all because we were tied in with broadband. So then I got into economic development. Now I've realized that one of the keys that we have, and I look out among the audience, and you're very similar to what I see all over the state, and that is the only way we're going to grow our communities is if we start to get these legacy people back in. We get our kids and more families to move in. And guess what? They're starting to work out of their homes. But the only way that's going to happen is if they are connected to the internet and they're connected through a broadband. So that's how I've got involved. I've gotten in the legislature. I've taken the lead on this. This goes back to the Peleni administration, believe it or not, who started the first task force and then it's moved through, and now the Dayton administration, we've been pushing this. The last couple of years, we've seen some really good bipartisan support. So that's that. So let me talk a little bit about this. What is this session today? This is a listening session. We need to hear from you, and I can tell you Representative Davids has done a nice job of assembling providers, and inside the group here there's a number of providers, and they need to hear your concerns. A lot of people have said to me, well, you're just doing these town hall. No, these are not dog and pony shows. We need to hear from you. We need to hear what's not allowing you to get better broadband, what's not allowing you to get better service, and how we can do that. Some of this has got to come through legislation. There's some great reforms out there that we're pushing, and a lot of people keep saying, well, we need broadband grants. Well, we do. We probably need some supplemental state dollars, but we got some federal dollars, and we also have some reforms. And let me tell you about two of those reforms. What people don't understand is technology is changing. What we see today is it used to come in on your phone line. Then we could do it through a coax cable. We could have maybe a DSL, or you could have these modems. And now it's wireless. So we need to be agnostic about it. We don't need to say just fiber or just copper. We need to be able to find the most households we can connect for the most efficient use of money. And the only way that's going to happen is if we leverage federal dollars. You're going to hear about Connect America funds, also state dollars, and reforms. And one of the reforms that we have out there is a better service model that we're doing with what's called the Telecom Reform Bill that I'm hosting. And this will allow multiple providers to operate at the same service level. Why? Because there's only two ways we're going to drive the cost down for homes. Number one, the government's going to come in and subsidize, and we know how that works. Or we bring in more providers, and we allow them to offer more services, and we allow the prices to come down as they get competitive amongst each other. That's what I'm pushing for. I have found in rural Minnesota that one of the biggest lacks we have is the amount of service providers. If we get more providers, we get better choices, and we get better costs, and we get better access. So those are a couple things that I'm doing. Let me talk about broadband for a second. What is broadband? People say broadband is fiber. Broadband is not fiber. Broadband is connectivity. I can get you broadband through a wireless connection. I can get it through fiber. I can get it through copper. Broadband to my daughter. Let me tell you what broadband is to my daughter. She's a high school senior, and then I have a couple of them behind her. But we were traveling to do college visits, and as we're sitting there and we're filling out the applications, my wife says to her, Amelia, you need to get us the paper applications so we can read that. And she says, no, I don't do paper. What are you talking about? Print this off, we're old, we have to be able to sit at the dining room table and read this. She says, no, I don't do that. They are doing their college applications on their wireless phone while we're driving across the country to grandma's house. And she's doing all this with her phone. That's her broadband connection, and it's wherever she goes. So we have to think outside the box a little bit, because what you and I think of as broadband may be just sitting at home and being able to hook our computer up. Our kids and grandkids see this as a whole different world. They see this as a world that I can go wherever I need to go with my device, and I'm always connected. And we've got to think about that, because if we just spend our money hardwiring things, we're going to miss a whole generation of kids that need to be out and about and mobile. So that's a couple of things on broadband. And that's very tricky in the legislative world that we do, because we have to be able to do two things. We have to hook up as many houses as we can, and we have to get to the toughest houses. That's what the state subsidies have got to do, because remember, the private sector is going to come into the high density population, and they're going to put their fiber lines in like they do everything else. But it's when you go over the hill and through the woods to grandmother's house, it's really expensive, right? And so that's what we got to do. The state funds should focus there, do the unserved, and move towards the middle where the served areas are, and that's where the private, the state, and the federal dollars will come together. So that's a little bit of how I'm pushing for this. We are seeing a huge push in this all around the state, and it's for a couple reasons. Telemedicine, more and more access to medicine. Homes are finding that maybe there's a cheaper solution to getting my medicine online than it is always going to the doctors. Education, connecting schools. You're going to see more and more of a push when we have bad weather days, whether it's here or like in Roseau. Rather than putting kids on the bus for 2 hours in a really bad weather day, let's let them stay at home, and let's let them access their educational opportunities and instruction online. So this is the world we're moving to. And the other thing is, we know the next generation is competing at this level digitally. So let me tell you some of the pitfalls of what we're doing. I'm trying really hard not to make this political. And there's a lot of people down in St. Paul, Representative Davids is one of them. We're not trying to make this a political fight, we're just trying to solve it. But you know what? Sometimes we get into where we start throwing numbers out. I would encourage you, don't get hung up on a number. Because whatever the number is in government, it's usually wrong. Let's look at solutions, and let's look at how we can solve this to communities. And from my vantage point, let's get to the hardest to reach areas. If I can achieve those goals, I think the private dollars will come in, and I think the federal dollars will supplement it. You're going to hear about CAF funding here in a minute, Connect America funds. So with that, I'll be around to talk more about what we're doing. And what's really important is we hear your questions. Because as we hear your feedback, the providers are here can take that back, and they can talk to their engineers, and they can talk about how they can build this out in a better way. So that's really what this is about. I think that covers all my notes. So Scott, I'd like to introduce Scott, and I'll let you take it from there and do your own introduction, because I'll probably get it wrong.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
I'm Scott Bowler. Hopefully you can hear me in the back. Scott Bowler with Frontier Communications. Frontier is a nationwide telecommunications provider. In Minnesota, we've got exchanges from the Iron Range, right down here. We're scattered throughout the state. Just want to give you maybe a little bit of background. I think one of the acronyms, there's a lot of acronyms in this industry, but the CAF funding is kind of the topic we're talking about today. And just take a step back and see what that means and what that's all about. There's been a concept, yes?
Why don't you come about 10 people?
Okay, that might be better. There's been a concept in telecommunications for decades called universal service. It's service available everywhere to everybody at an affordable price. And the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has had a lot of programs to support that, especially in rural, isolated, high cost to serve areas. They had a number of what they called universal service programs that gave money to companies whose cost to provide voice service was above the average. And that's been under, they've had those programs for years. And the way that